Welcome. Thank you for joining us for Ask Pastor Keith, where we get to ask questions to Pastor Keith, who's with us today. If you ever want to ask a question, feel free to just click on the link below and shoot it our way. Pastor Keith, today's question is actually about politics, and the question was, how should Christians engage in politics?
Well, that's a big question, and I think in a limited time, we can only answer a portion of that. But first attitude about politics is that we have become very political, maybe too much so, through this pandemic and other issues. I think we need to be aware of that. I say this because when we elect a political leader, we are not choosing a moral or ethical leader. We are choosing a public servant, a civil servant, who will serve us. It's not like olden times, a king rule over us, things like that. And so we need to change our mindset. It's not somebody that we're going to follow blindly. I think with that mind, I think being a Republican or Democrat or Libertarian or Greenpeace or whatever else, I don't think any single party reflects God's value as believers. So becoming blindly following because my party says this and that is, first of all, I don't think is a wise positioning for a believer. And second is, people go into politics for various reasons. And many of them have megalomaniac kind of approach to this. I can solve it, messianic, trap, or whatever you want to call it. So many times they do not reflect biblical value, and it is wrong for us to expect that. Having said that, when we read, First Kings, Second Kings, and the Chronicles and all that, and we realize the condition of the people, impacts the leadership, as well as the leadership impacts the condition of people, a reciprocal relationship. With that in mind, we have to be very careful who we put in the office. So first of all, we cannot blindly follow our party lines and whatnot. And the second is that we need to be very wise about how much trust we put on a person. Biblically speaking, that's wrong. Only God is trustworthy. And so, and we see them as civil servants, not more than that. And so when we vote, we need to vote as believers. That's a very important responsibility. We need to study the issues very carefully. We cannot rely on mainline media, or we cannot afford to go into fake news or conspiracy theory and all that kind of things. We need to really understand the real issue. But as believers, usually we end up choosing lesser evil. It's not a solution. Only God's way is correct. And yet, because we are living in a fallen world, and these leaders rise from the fallen world with their own issues, just like rest of us, it's not like they have a solution or a perfect policy that's going to solve all the problems. That's not it. And yet, having studied the issues carefully, we have to choose the lesser evil that aligns closer to the purpose and will of God. And because of that, we need to really engage and study, to know all that. I think that we need to be engaged in the political talks, conversations, and dialogues. And yet, our real faith is in God. There's no one person or party or policies that's going to bring about real equality or anything else like that. And one of the other things I want to talk about evangelical Christians, especially in that camp, is that we tend to gravitate toward a couple of pet peeves policies, like abortion and LGBTQ and all that. Those are important issues. I'm not making a light of them. and the sanctity of life, yes, they are very important. And yet, our life is more complex than that. And there's more evil that can seep into other layers of policies and all. So we cannot just choose a person because this person stands for this issue, not single issue. Life is much more complicated. So as believers, we need to be really aware, informed, and study that this person or this party will really reflect God's will as close as possible, even in this fallen world. And therefore, Christians must get engaged and vote very carefully, right? But the bottom line is, it's God's timetable. And sometimes we have to be aware of the fact that we are living in such part of the human history, and we need to really follow the will of God in that way.
So, with so many different things in politics, especially being at the forefront of people's minds and conversations, I think some people can feel overwhelmed and not know like what to listen to, right? Because the feeds may be similar. What's a wise way of getting the proper information and then engaging in those conversations, which are happening frequently in our day-to-day?
So, as the Bible says, there's nothing new under the sun. A lot of them are repackaged, same idea, and in fact, same idea that has proved as a failure. And that's why studying the history is very important. There are numerous books about it. I think we need to read it. These things we cannot just approach with sound bites and the snapshots of news coverage. We need to really study and know and get into a discussion about this. I'll be talking about critical race theory in some other session. But people don't understand it's a theory. It's not reality. And we're trying to apply that in our all education and all that. Very dangerous. If I revisit like communism or socialism, socialism is language of economics. Communism is language of politics. And these are separate things, and yet they usually go together. So we need to be very clear about the language itself. But this communism, we fought communism last century, starting from 1917, Bolshevik Revolution, and 1960s and 70s, and the Cultural Revolution in China, and all this, and literally and historically, several hundred million people died. Not to mention, more people suffered under this. And surprisingly and tragically, people are so disconnected with history. We are revisiting these ideas in different packages. That really alarms me. And that's why studying the history correctly and knowing the issue in depth is very important. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Pastor Keith, just giving us a perspective as we enter into a season with so many things on the forefront of our minds. For everyone watching, there's so many more episodes that you can click and watch, or you can also ask your own questions. At the same time, if you go to the Church of Southland website, anytime there's pastoral hours where you can meet with pastors and talk deeper about these topics. So we hope you continue to engage with us, join in on the conversation. So thank you again.